The morning was soft, the kind that wraps a neighborhood in a gentle haze of possibility. Sunlight spilled over the rooftops of Willow Grove, a suburban enclave where every lawn was manicured, every mailbox gleamed, and every smile was just a little too practiced. It was the kind of place where you could almost believe the world was perfect, where kids could play without fear, and parents could sip coffee on their porches, trusting the day would unfold as it should. Almost. I was in the kitchen, the smell of fresh coffee curling through the air, mixing with the faint sweetness of pancakes on the griddle. My son, Ethan, was outside in the backyard, his laughter a bright thread weaving through the open window. At 7, he was all energy and imagination, his dark hair perpetually messy, his sneakers always untied. Today, he was building a fort out of cardboard boxes we'd saved from our last move, his small hands wielding a roll of duct tape like a knight's sword. He'd been at it for hours, dragging boxes from the garage, stacking them into a lopsided castle, and decorating it with markers in every color he could find. "It's my fortress, Dad," he'd shouted earlier, grinning wide enough to show the gap where his front tooth used to be. I'd laughed, ruffled his hair, and told him to keep the markers off the grass. That was my mistake, thinking I could let him be a kid for one unguarded moment, thinking the rules of this place wouldn't reach into our backyard and choke the joy out of it. The first sign of trouble was the shadow. It fell across the window, sharp and angular, like a blade slicing through the morning light. I glanced up from the stove, spatula in hand, and saw her. Evelyn Harper, president of the Willow Grove Homeowners Association, stood at the edge of our property line, her arms crossed, her lips pressed into a thin, judgmental line. Her gray pantsuit was immaculate, her hair pulled back so tightly it looked like it hurt. She was staring at Ethan's fort, her eyes narrowed, her posture radiating authority no one had ever voted to give her. I set the spatula down and wiped my hands on a dish towel, my stomach tightening. Evelyn wasn't just a neighbor. She was a force, a self-appointed guardian of Willow Grove's standards. In the 6 months we'd lived here, she'd already sent us 3 violation notices, one for a basketball hoop mounted an inch too low, another for a trash can left out past 7 a.m., and a third for unauthorized garden decorations because Ethan had stuck a plastic dinosaur in the flower bed. Each notice came with her signature, a flourished scrawl that screamed control. I'd ignored them, paid the fines, and told my wife, Claire, it wasn't worth the fight. But now, seeing her standing there, her gaze locked on my son, I knew this wasn't about a dinosaur or a trash can. "Ethan," I called through the window, keeping my voice steady. "Come inside for a sec, buddy." He didn't hear me. He was too busy taping a cardboard turret to his fort, humming a tune I didn't recognize. Evelyn took a step forward, her heels sinking into the grass, and raised her voice. "Young man, what do you think you're doing?" Ethan froze, the roll of tape slipping from his hand. He looked up, his brown eyes wide, confused. "It's my fort," he said, his voice small. "I'm building a castle." "This," Evelyn said, gesturing at the cardboard structure like it was a pile of garbage, "is a violation of HOA regulations. Temporary structures are not permitted in visible areas without prior approval. And those markers? Defacing property is unacceptable." Ethan's face crumpled. "But it's just cardboard. It's not hurting anything." I was out the door before I realized I'd moved, the screen door slamming behind me. "Evelyn," I said, my voice low, controlled, but edged with something sharper. "He's 7. It's cardboard. It'll be gone by tonight." She turned to me, her expression cold, unyielding. "Rules are rules, Mr. Bennett. If we let every child turn their yard into a junkyard, this neighborhood would look like a slum. You signed the covenant when you moved here. It's our backyard," I said, stepping closer, "and he's not hurting anyone. Let it go." She didn't budge. Instead, she reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper, a violation notice already filled out in her precise handwriting. "This is your 4th infraction in 6 months. I suggest you comply before fines escalate, and remove that mess immediately." Ethan was watching us now, his hands clutching the edge of a cardboard box, his eyes darting between me and Evelyn. I could see the fear creeping into his face, the kind of fear no kid should feel in their own yard. "Dad," he said softly. Am I in trouble? No, buddy, I said, forcing a smile. You're fine. Go inside and grab a pancake, okay? He hesitated, then nodded and ran toward the house, leaving his fort behind. The screen door clicked shut, and I turned back to Evelyn. You scared him, I said, my voice dropping. You came into my yard to scare my kid over cardboard. Back off. Her eyes narrowed, but her smile was venomous. I'm doing my job, Mr. Bennett. Protecting property values. If you can't control your child, perhaps you don't belong in Willow Grove. That was the moment something shifted inside me. Not anger, not yet. It was something colder, heavier, like a stone settling in my chest. I'd dealt with people like Evelyn before, petty tyrants who hid behind rules to wield power they hadn't earned. But this was different. This was my son, my home, my line in the sand. Get off my property, I said, my voice flat. Now. She held my gaze for a moment, then turned on her heel and walked away, her heels clicking against the pavement like a metronome. I watched her go, her silhouette disappearing around the corner. But the weight in my chest didn't lift. I knew this wasn't over. People like Evelyn didn't let things go. The rest of the day passed in a blur of normalcy, or at least the pretense of it. Ethan ate his pancakes, though his usual chatter was quieter, his eyes flickering to the backyard where his fort still stood. Claire came home from her shift at the hospital, her nurse's scrubs wrinkled, her face tired but bright until she saw my expression. What happened? She asked, dropping her bag on the counter. I told her everything of Lee's visit, the violation notice, the way Ethan's face had fallen when she called his fort a mess. Claire's jaw tightened, her hands balling into fists. She's a bully, she said. We should fight this. We can't let her scare Ethan like that. I know, I said, but fighting her means fighting the whole HOA. She's got the board in her pocket, and half the neighbors are too afraid to cross her. Then we make them less afraid, Claire said, her voice fierce. We're not the only ones she's targeted. Maybe it's time we talk to the neighbors. I nodded, but my mind was already elsewhere, replaying Evelyn's cold smile. The way she'd stood over Ethan like he was a problem to be solved. I'd spent my career as a private investigator, digging into secrets people thought they'd buried: cheating spouses, crooked business partners, the occasional low-level mobster. I knew how to read people, how to find the cracks in their facades. Evelyn wasn't just a control freak. She was something darker, something that thrived on fear, and I wasn't going to let her take my son's smile. That night, after Ethan was asleep, I sat at my desk in the garage, my laptop open, the glow of the screen casting shadows on the walls. I started digging. Willow Grove's whole records were public, at least in theory, but getting them required knowing where to look. I'd done this before, pulled financials, cross-referenced names, traced patterns. It was second nature. By 2 a.m., I had a stack of printed documents, meeting minutes, violation logs, budget reports. Most of it was mundane, but there were hints of something off. Fines issued to the same families repeatedly, always the ones who didn't attend HOA meetings. Vague line items in the budget for community enhancement with no receipts attached. And one name kept popping up, Evelyn Harper, signing off on every decision, every fine, every rule change. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my eyes. She wasn't just enforcing rules. She was building a system, one where she held all the power. But power like that always left a trail. I just had to find it. The next morning, Ethan didn't want to go outside. What if the mean lady comes back? He asked, his voice small, his fingers twisting the hem of his shirt. She won't, I lied, kneeling to meet his eyes. And if she does, I'll be right here. Okay. He nodded, but the doubt lingered in his expression. I hugged him, my chest aching, and sent him to the living room with Claire to watch cartoons. Then I stepped outside, grabbed a trash bag, and started dismantling his fort. Each piece of cardboard felt heavier than it should, like I was tearing down his imagination piece by piece. By the time I was done, the backyard looked sterile again. Just another patch of grass in Willow Grove's perfect grid. That's when I saw her. Not Evelyn, someone else. A woman I didn't recognize, standing across the street, leaning against a black SUV. She was younger than Evelyn, maybe late 30s, with short blonde hair and sunglasses that hid her eyes. She was watching me, her posture casual but deliberate, like a predator sizing up prey. I raised a hand, a neighborly wave, testing her. She didn't wave back. Instead, she pushed off the SUV, climbed inside, and drove away. The engine's hum fading into the morning. I didn't like it. My instincts, honed from years of tracking liars and cheats, were screaming. She wasn't a neighbor. She wasn't random. She was connected to Evelyn. I was sure of it, but I had no proof of it. I spent the next few days talking to neighbors, starting with the ones I knew had gotten violation notices. Most were hesitant, their voices low, their eyes darting to their windows like Evelyn might be listening. But a few opened up. Mr. Patel, who lived 3 houses down, told me about a $500 fine for leaving his car parked on the street overnight during a family emergency. Mrs. Nguyen, an elderly widow, showed me a stack of notices for unapproved flowers in her garden, each one threatening legal action if she didn't comply. And then there was Tom Carver, a single dad who'd been hit with a $1,000 fine for a shed he'd built without HOA approval. I went to the board meeting to appeal, he said, his voice bitter. Evelyn just smiled and said, "Rules are rules." They voted against me, 5-0. By the end of the week, I had a list, 17 families, all targeted with excessive fines or threats, all too afraid to fight back. Evelyn wasn't just a bully. She was a machine, grinding down anyone who didn't bow to her. But machines could be broken. I just needed the right leverage. On Thursday, it happened. I was in the garage, sorting through more HOA records, when I heard Ethan scream. Not a playful scream. Not the kind he let out when he was chasing fireflies or pretending to be a superhero. This was raw, terrified, the kind of sound that rips a parent's heart in half. I bolted outside. Ethan was in the front yard, sprawled on the grass, his hands clutching his face. Blood seeped between his fingers, bright red against his pale skin. His bike lay on its side, the front wheel bent, and standing over him, her arms crossed, was Evelyn Harper. "What the hell did you do?" I roared, dropping to my knees beside Ethan. His eyes were wide, tears mixing with the blood on his cheeks. "My face," he whimpered. "It hurts." I pulled his hands away gently. A gash ran across his forehead, deep and jagged, blood pooling in the dirt beneath him. My vision blurred, rage and fear colliding in my chest. I looked up at Evelyn, who hadn't moved, her expression blank, almost bored. "He was riding his bike on the sidewalk," she said, her voice calm, like she was reading a weather report. "Bikes are not permitted on pedestrian paths." I stopped him to explain the rules, and he fell. He fell, I spat, standing so fast she took a step back. "He's bleeding, Evelyn. He's 7 years old, and you're telling me he just fell?" She shrugged, a small, dismissive gesture. "Children need to learn consequences. Perhaps if you'd taught him the rules, this wouldn't have happened." I was on her before I could think, my hand grabbing her arm, my face inches from hers. "You touched my son," I said, my voice low, shaking with barely controlled fury. "You put your hands on him, and now he's hurt. You don't get to walk away from this." She yanked her arm free, her eyes flashing with indignation. "I'm the HOA president, Mr. Bennett. I have every right to enforce the rules. If you touch me again, I'll have you arrested for assault." I laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "You think you're untouchable? You think a title makes you a god? I'm a private investigator, Evelyn. I've taken down people a lot scarier than you. And right now, you're not dealing with a neighbor. You're dealing with a father." Her lips twitched, but she didn't respond. Instead, she turned and walked away, her heels clicking, her posture straight, like she hadn't just left my son bleeding in the dirt. I wanted to chase her, to grab her, to make her feel the pain she'd caused. But Ethan was whimpering behind me, his small hand clutching my leg. "Daddy," he said, his voice breaking. "Why does she hate me?" I scooped him up, his blood soaking into my shirt, and carried him to the car. "She doesn't hate you," I said, though the words felt like a lie. "She's just wrong, and we're going to fix this." I drove to the rear, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. Ethan was quiet, his head resting against the window, his small body trembling. At the hospital, the nurses moved quickly, stitching the gash, cleaning the blood, running tests. "He's got a concussion," the doctor said, his voice gentle but firm. "The cut's deep, but it'll heal. The concussion's the bigger concern. He needs rest, no screens, no rough play. We'll keep him overnight for observation." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. Ethan was asleep now, his face pale against the hospital pillow, his small chest rising and falling under the thin blanket. I sat beside him, my hand resting on his, and made a promise. Not to him, not to Claire, but to myself. Evelyn Harper wasn't just going to pay. She was going to burn. When I got home that night, Claire was waiting, her eyes red from crying. She'd been at the hospital earlier, but I'd sent her home to rest. Now, she stood in the kitchen, her arms wrapped around herself, her voice shaking. "She pushed him, didn't she? She didn't just stop him. She hurt him." "I don't know," I said, though every instinct screamed that Claire was right. "He says he doesn't remember exactly what happened. Just that she yelled, grabbed his handlebars, and then he was on the ground." Claire's eyes blazed. "We're not letting this go, Jack. We're not paying another fine or signing another apology. She's done." "I know," I said. "I'm already working on it." I showed her the files I'd pulled, the pattern of fines, the questionable budget lines. Claire's eyes widened as she read. "This is she's stealing, isn't she? From the HOA?" "Maybe," I said. "I need more. But this is a start." The next day, I went to the police station. I filed a report, laid out everything: Ethan's injury, Evelyn's presence, her history of targeting neighbors. The officer, a young guy named Torres, listened politely, but shook his head. "Mr. Bennett, it's your word against hers. She says he fell. There's no witness, no footage. And she's Evelyn Harper. She's got a lot of pull around here." "Pull?" I said, my voice rising. "She hurt my kid. She's not a mayor. She's not a cop. She's a glorified hall monitor with a power trip." Torres sighed. "I get it, I do. But without evidence, my hands are tied. She's already called the station, said you threatened her. She's got a lawyer ready to file a restraining order." I leaned across the desk, my voice low. "You tell her lawyer this. If she comes near my family again, a restraining order will be the least of her problems." Torres shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I'm on your side. But you need proof. Get me something solid, and I'll push it up the chain." I left the station, my blood boiling. Proof. I'd get proof. I'd bury Evelyn Harper in it. Over the next week, I turned our house into a fortress. I installed cameras, discreet ones, hidden in the porch light, the mailbox, the oak tree by the driveway. I upgraded the locks, added motion sensors, and set up a live feed I could check from my phone. Claire thought I was paranoid, but she didn't argue. She'd seen Ethan's stitches, the bruise blooming across his forehead. She knew what was at stake. I kept digging, too. The HOA's financials were a goldmine. I found $63,000 to $114 in consulting fees paid to a company called Harper Solutions, registered to Evelyn's brother, Daniel Harper. No website, no employees, just a PO box and a bank account. I cross-referenced it with county records and found Daniel had a history of fraud, convictions, time stuff, but enough to raise red flags. Evelyn wasn't just enforcing rules. She was running a racket, siphoning HOA dues into her family's pockets. But financial fraud wasn't enough. I needed to tie her to Ethan's injury, to prove she'd crossed a line no title could protect her from. I went back to the neighbors, this time with a different approach. I didn't ask about fines or notices. I asked about Evelyn's behavior, her patterns, her enemies. And that's when I met Mrs. Delgado. She was 78, a retired librarian with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue. She lived 2 streets over, in a house that hadn't changed since the 80s. Over tea, she told me about her grandson, Miguel, who'd been 9 when Evelyn caught him skateboarding in the cul-de-sac. She grabbed his board, threw it in her trunk, and told him he'd get it back when he learned respect, Mrs. Delgado said, her hands trembling with anger. He came home crying. 2 days later, his board was returned, broken in half. She said it was an accident. I know better. Did you report it? I asked. She nodded. The police did nothing, said there was no proof. But I saw her eyes, Mr. Bennett. That woman enjoys hurting people, especially children. I leaned forward. Did anyone else see what happened to Miguel? She hesitated, then nodded. My neighbor's daughter, Leela. She was 10 at the time. She saw the whole thing from her window. She's 13 now, but she remembers. That was my opening. A witness. I thanked Mrs. Delgado and drove straight to Lila's house. Her mother, a nervous woman named Carla, didn't want to talk at first. Evelyn's got eyes everywhere, she whispered. If she finds out we spoke. She won't, I said. But my son's in the hospital because of her. I need to know what Leela saw. Carla relented, and Leela, a quiet girl with braids and a guarded expression, told me her story. I saw Mrs. Harper yelling at Miguel. She grabbed his skateboard and slammed it against the curb until it snapped. Then she laughed, like it was funny. Miguel was crying, and she just drove away. I recorded every word. It wasn't Ethan's case, but it was a pattern. Evelyn didn't just enforce ruthless act. And now I had a witness who could testify to her cruelty. By the end of the month, I had enough to move. The financial records, Lila's statement, Mrs. Delgado's testimony, and a dozen other neighbor complaints formed a dossier thick enough to choke a lawyer. I took it to Detective Torres, who'd been promoted to lead on child-related cases. He flipped through the pages, his expression darkening. "This is solid," he said. "But Ethan's case is still thin. No witnesses, no footage. You're sure he can't remember what happened?" "He's 7, I said, "and he's scared. But I know she pushed him. I feel it." Torres nodded. "I believe you. Let me take this to the DA. We'll start with the financialstos are easier to prove. If we can nail her for embezzlement, it'll weaken her defense on the assault." It wasn't enough, but it was a start. I went home, kissed Ethan's forehead as he slept, and promised him again that I'd make this right. But as I stood in the dark, watching the live feed from my cameras, I saw that black SUV again. It was parked across the street, its engine idling, the driver's face hidden in shadow. My gut twisted. Evelyn wasn't alone. She had someone watching, someone waiting, and I was going to find out who. The hospital room was too quiet. The kind of quiet that presses against your skull and makes every thought feel like a scream. Ethan lay in the bed, his small body dwarfed by the white sheets, his forehead stitched and bruised. His eyes closed in a restless sleep. The monitors beeped softly, a steady rhythm that should have been comforting, but only reminded me how fragile he was. Claire sat beside him, her hand wrapped around his, her face pale but resolute. She hadn't slept in 2 days, not since Ethan's concussion landed him here. Neither had I, but sleep wasn't an option. Not when Evelyn Harper was still out there. Her smug smile burned into my mind, her heels clicking away from my son's blood like it was just another Tuesday. I stood by the window, staring out at the parking lot, my phone buzzing in my pocket. It was Detective Torres, his voice clipped and urgent. "Jack, we've got something. The DA's looking at the financials you sent. Harper Solutions is a shell company. No question. We traced the payments to an account in Evelyn's brother's name, Daniel Harper. He's got a rap sheet fraud, tax evasion, nothing major, but enough to make this stick. We're building a case for embezzlement." "That's a start," I said, my voice low, glancing at Ethan. "But what about my son?" "She pushed him, Torres. I know it." He sighed. "I hear you, but we need more. No witnesses, no footage. The DA's hesitant to push an assault charge without something concrete. Evelyn's already lawyered up, claiming Ethan fell on his own. She's got half the HOA board backing her story, saying she was just advising him." "Advising?" I spat, my grip tightening on the phone. "She's a predator, not a guidance counselor. You've got Lila's statement about the skateboard incident. You've got Mrs. Delgado. That's a pattern. It's circumstantial," Torres said. "It helps, but it's not enough for assault. We're working on it, Jack. Just don't do anything stupid." I hung up without answering, my jaw clenched so hard my teeth ached. Don't do anything stupid. Easy for him to say. He wasn't the one watching his 7-year-old son flinch in his sleep. Wasn't the one who'd seen blood pooling in the grass. I turned back to Claire, who was watching me, her eyes sharp despite the exhaustion. "You're not letting this go, are you?" she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not a chance," I said. "She doesn't get to walk away from this." Claire nodded, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Then do what you do best, Jack. Find the truth, but don't lose yourself in it." I kissed her forehead, then Effen's, and left the hospital. The air outside was heavy, the late summer heat clinging to my skin like guilt. I drove home, my mind racing, replaying every moment of that Davelin's cold voice, Effen's scream. The black SUV idling across the street. That SUV was the key. It wasn't random. It was connected to Evelyn, and I was going to find out how. Back home, I locked the doors and checked the cameras. The live feed showed nothing unusual, just the quiet street, the perfectly trimmed hedges, the mailboxes lined up like soldiers. But I wasn't fooled. Willow Grove wasn't a neighborhood anymore. It was a battlefield, and Evelyn Harper was its general. I sat at my desk in the garage, the same desk where I'd spent years unraveling other people's secrets, and opened my laptop. The HOA financials were still open, a maze of numbers and vague descriptions. I dug deeper, cross-referencing bank records, property filings, anything I could access through public databases and a few less-than-public ones. I'd learned to navigate as a private investigator. That's when I found it, a second company, Willow Ventures, registered to a woman named Rachel Harper. Not Evelyn's brother this time, her sister. The company had no online presence, just a single transaction, a $72,000 payment from the HOA for landscaping consultation. Except Willow Grove's landscaping was handled by a local firm, Green Haven, which had been under contract for a decade. I pulled Green Haven's invoices and found no gaps, no overlap with Willow Ventures. The payment was a ghost, funneled straight to Rachel Harper's account. I leaned back, my pulse quickening. Evelyn wasn't just skimming HOA dues with her brother. She'd built a family empire, bleeding the neighborhood dry while hiding behind her clipboard and her rules. But who was Rachel? I ran her name through every database I had access to. Rachel Harper, 38, no criminal record, no local address. The only hit was a DMV record from 3 years ago, showing a driver's license with a photo that matched the woman I'd seen leaning against the black SUV. Blonde hair, sharp features, a smirk that screamed Harper family arrogance. She was Evelyn's shadow, her enforcer, maybe her muscle, and she was watching my house. I printed the DMV photo and taped it to the wall beside my desk, right next to Evelyn's HOA headshot. 2 Harpers, 2 threats. I wasn't just fighting one tyrant now, it was up against a dynasty. The next morning, I started canvassing the neighborhood again, this time with a new purpose, finding anyone who'd seen Rachel. Most neighbors shut me down, their fear of Evelyn palpable even through closed doors. But at the end of the street, I knocked on the door of Javier Ruiz, a mechanic who'd lived in Willow Grove longer than most. He was in his 50s, broad-shouldered, with hands stained from years of working on engines. He'd gotten a violation notice last year for parking his work truck in his driveway, and I'd heard he'd nearly lost his house over the fines. "Javier," I said when he opened the door, "I need your help. Have you seen this woman?" I held up Rachel's DMV photo. He squinted at it, his expression darkening. "Yeah, she's been around. Drives that black SUV, parks at the corner sometimes. Never talks, just watches. Thought she was a realtor at first, but she's too cold." "When did you last see her?" I asked. 2 nights ago, he said. "She was sitting in her car, staring at your house. I figured she was one of Evelyn's people. That woman's got spies everywhere." I nodded, my stomach twisting. "Did you ever see her do anything? Talk to anyone, mess with property?" Javier hesitated, then stepped onto his porch, lowering his voice. "Last month, my truck got keyed. Deep scratches, cost me $1,000 to fix. I didn't see her do it, but she was parked across the street that night, engine running. I told the cops, but they said no proof, no case." "Sounds familiar," I said, my jaw tightening. "You ever talk to Evelyn about it?" He snorted. "Tried. She said I was careless with my property and suggested I park in the garage next time. Then I got another fine for unauthorized vehicle storage. She's untouchable, Jack. Always has been." "Not anymore," I said. "I'm building something. Financial fraud, witness statements, maybe more. You in?" Javier studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "If it means taking her down, I'm in. But be careful. She doesn't fight fair." That night, I installed 2 more cameras. These ones angled to cover the street beyond my property line. If Rachel was watching, I'd catch her. I also set up a motion-activated spotlight in the front yard, bright enough to blind anyone sneaking around after dark. Claire wasn't thrilled about the fortress vibe, but she didn't argue. She'd seen the DMV photo, heard Javier's story. She knew we weren't just fighting Evelyn anymore. The next day, Ethan came home from the hospital. He was quieter now, his laughter replaced by a cautious stillness. The stitches on his forehead were starting to heal, but the bruise was still a sickly yellow, a reminder of what Evelyn had taken from him. He didn't want to go outside, didn't want to ride his bike. "What if she's there?" he asked, his voice small, his eyes fixed on the floor. "She won't touch you again," I said, kneeling beside him. "I promise." But promises felt hollow when Rachel Harper was out there, circling like a vulture. I took Ethan's hand and led him to the living room, where Claire was setting up a puzzle on the coffee table. "Stay inside for now, buddy," I said. "We'll build another fort soon, okay? A better one." He nodded, but the spark was gone from his eyes. I turned away before he could see the rage in mine. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday, gray and humid, the air thick with the promise of rain. I was in the garage, combing through more HOA records, when my phone pinged with an alert from the new street-facing camera. I opened the feed and froze. There she was, Rachel Harper, standing on the sidewalk across from my house, her black SUV parked behind her. She was holding a phone, snapping photos of my front yard, her movements deliberate, unhurried. Then she looked up, straight at the camera, and smiled. Not a friendly smiley, a challenge. I grabbed my keys and stepped outside, my heart pounding. "Can I help you?" I called, crossing the street, my voice calm but edged with steel. She lowered her phone, her sunglasses reflecting the overcast sky. "Just admiring the neighborhood," she said, her voice smooth, almost mocking. "You must be Jack Bennett, and you must be Rachel Harper," I said, stopping a few feet away. "Evelyn's sister, right? You've been spending a lot of time around my house." She tilted her head, her smile widening. "Public sidewalk, Mr. Bennett. I'm not breaking any rules. You're watching my family," I said, stepping closer. "You keyed Javier's truck. You're working with Evelyn, aren't you?" Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes narrowed. "Careful with accusations. You don't have the proof to back them up. And from what I hear, you've got a habit of threatening women. First my sister, now me." I laughed, short and cold. "Threatening? No. I'm protecting my son. You and Evelyn made a mistake when you came after him. I'm not some scared neighbor you can bully with fines." She stepped forward, closing the distance between us, her voice low. "You think you're clever, don't you? Digging into records, talking to neighbors. You're out of your depth, Jack. This neighborhood belongs to us. Always has." "Not anymore," I said. "You're on camera now. Every move you make, I've got it. And I'm not stopping until you and your sister are done." For a moment, she didn't move, her eyes locked on mine. Then she laughed, a sharp, brittle sound, and turned toward her SUV. "Good luck with that," she said over her shoulder. "You'll need it." I watched her drive away, my hands shaking with adrenaline. She wasn't just Evelyn's sister, she was her partner, her enforcer. And she wasn't scared. That made her dangerous. I called Torres immediately, sending him the camera footage. "That's Rachel Harper," I said. "She's stalking my house, taking photos. She's involved, Torres. I know it." He watched the video, his voice grim. "It's not enough for an arrest, but it's something. She's bold, I'll give her that. I'll run her plates, see if we can tie her to anything else. In the meantime, keep those cameras rolling." I didn't need to be told twice. That night, I stayed up, watching the feeds, my laptop open to the whole records. I found another thread to pull, a series of complaints filed against Evelyn over the past 5 years, all dismissed by the board. One stood out, a woman named Linda Carter, who'd lived in Willow Grove 3 years ago. She'd accused Evelyn of slashing her tires after a dispute over a backyard swing set. The police report noted insufficient evidence, but Linda had moved away shortly after. Her house sold at a loss. I tracked her down through a real estate database and found her new address in a neighboring county. The next morning, I drove to Linda's house, a modest ranch-style home with a small garden out front. She was in her 40s, her hair streaked with gray, her eyes wary when she opened the door. "You're Jack Bennett," she said, before I could introduce myself. "Javier called me. Said you're taking on Evelyn Harper." "I am," I said, "and I need your help." She invited me in, her hands fidgeting as she poured coffee. "I tried to fight her," she said. 3 years ago, she came after my kids. They built a swing set in our backyard, nothing fancy, just something for them to play on. Evelyn said it violated height restrictions, demanded we tear it down. I refused. Next thing I know, my tires are slashed, my mailbox is smashed, and my kids are too scared to play outside. I reported it, but the cops said there was no proof. She had the board, the police, everyone in her pocket. "Did you ever see her do anything?" I asked. "Or anyone working with her?" Linda nodded, her voice dropping. "Her sister, Rachel. She was there the night my tires got slashed. I saw her car parked down the street, same black SUV. I couldn't prove it was her, but I knew. She's just as bad as Evelyn, maybe worse." I recorded her statement, my heart racing. Another witness, another piece of the puzzle. "Will you testify?" I asked. "If it comes to that?" She hesitated, then nodded. "For your son?" "Yeah, I'll do it." When I got home, Claire was waiting, her face pale. "Jack, someone was here," she said, her voice trembling. "I was in the backyard with Ethan, and I saw Tyrannical. She was standing at the fence, just staring. Ethan didn't see her, thank God, but I did. She smiled at me, Jack. Then she walked away. I pulled her into my arms, my blood running cold. "Did you get it on camera?" She nodded. "The backyard feed caught her. I checked it after she left. I reviewed the footage. There she was, Rachel Harper, standing at the edge of our property, her blonde hair catching the sunlight, her smile sharp and predatory. She didn't step onto our land, didn't touch anything, just stood there, watching, like a warning. I sent the video to Torres, my message blunt. She's escalating. Do something." His response came an hour later. "We're pulling her in for questioning." The footage, Linda's statement, the financial sits building. "Stay sharp, Jack." But staying sharp wasn't enough. That night, I woke to the sound of glass shattering. I bolted out of bed, grabbing the baseball bat I kept by the nightstand. Claire was already up, her phone in hand, dialing 911. I checked the cameras and saw the damage, our front window, smashed, a brick lying in the living room amid shards of glass. Scrawled across it in red marker was one word: stop. I didn't call Torres. Not yet. Instead, I stepped outside, bat in hand, scanning the street. The black SUV was gone, but I knew who'd done this. Rachel wasn't just watching anymore. She was striking. The next day, I doubled down. I met with a forensic accountant, a contact from my Pi days, and handed over the whole financials. She confirmed what I'd suspected. Harper Solutions and Willow Ventures were shells, funneling over $150,000 in HOA funds to Evelyn and Rachel over 3 years. "This is fraud, plain and simple," she said. "You've got enough for a criminal case, maybe even RICO if you can prove coordination." I took her report to Torres, who was now working overtime on the case. "We're moving on the embezzlement," he said. "Warrants are in motion for Evelyn's and Rachel's financial records. But Jack, I'm warning you, Rachel's dangerous. She's got no record, but my guys say she's got ties to some rough people. Stay low until we've got her." I didn't stay low. I couldn't. Not when Ethan woke up screaming from nightmares. Not when Claire jumped at every shadow. I went to the next HOA meeting, uninvited, and walked into the community center like I owned it. Evelyn was at the podium, her voice droning about mailbox regulations, her eyes flicking to me as I entered. The room fell silent, neighbors shifting in their seats, their fear palpable. "Jack," she said, her smile tight, "this is a closed meeting." "Not anymore," I said, holding up a folder. "I've got proof you've been stealing from this neighborhood for years. Harper Solutions, Willow Venture sound familiar? You and your sister have been bleeding us dry, and I'm not the only one who knows it." The room erupted in whispers. Evelyn's face didn't change, but her hands gripped the podium tighter. "That's slander, Mr. Bennett. I suggest you leave before you regret it." "I'm not going anywhere," I said. "And neither are you, not until the police get here." As if on cue, Torres walked in, flanked by 2 officers. "Evelyn Harper," he said, his voice calm but firm. You're under arrest for suspicion of embezzlement and fraud." The room gasped. Evelyn's composure cracked, her eyes darting to the exit. But the officers were already moving, cuffing her wrists as she protested, her voice rising to a shriek. "This is a setup. I'm the victim here. He's lying." I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just watched as they led her out, her heels dragging against the floor. The neighbors stared, some in shock, others in quiet relief. For the first time in years, Willow Grove felt like it might breathe again. But I wasn't done. Rachel was still out there, and I knew she wouldn't let this go. Evelyn's arrest was just the beginning. The real fight was coming, and I was ready. The air in Willow Grove had changed, like the neighborhood itself was holding its breath. Evelyn Harper's arrest had sent ripples through the street, fracturing the fear she'd built her empire on. Neighbors whispered in their driveways, their voices no longer hushed, their eyes no longer darting to her house at the end of the cul-de-sac. But I wasn't celebrating. Not yet. Evelyn was in custody, her embezzlement case airtight, but Rachel Harper was still out there, a shadow with a smirk and a black SUV. And shadows don't fade until you shine a light on them. Ethan was home now, his stitches healing, but the concussion lingered like a ghost. He moved slower, spoke softer, his eyes scanning the windows before he'd step outside. "Is the mean lady gone?" he'd ask, clutching his stuffed dinosaur, the one he hadn't let go of since the hospital. I'd tell him yes, Evelyn was gone, but I couldn't lie about Rachel. I didn't know where she was, and that uncertainty gnawed at me, a constant pressure in my chest. Claire felt it too. She'd stopped sleeping through the night, her hand resting on the phone, ready to dial 911 at the slightest sound. Our house, once a home, felt like a bunker. I sat in the garage, my desk a war zone of papers, photos, and laptop screens glowing with camera feeds. The brick through our window marked with "stop" in red ink was still in a plastic bag, waiting for Torres to process it for prints. The cameras hadn't caught Rachel throwing it, but I knew it was her. Her SUV had been parked just outside the frame, engine idling, moments before the glass shattered. She was taunting me, testing how far she could push before I broke. But I wasn't the one who was going to break. The call came at 3 a.m., a week after Evelyn's arrest. Detective Torres, his voice rough with fatigue. "Jack, we've got a problem. Rachel's gone dark. She's not at her motel, not answering her phone. We've got an APB out, but she's slippery. And there's something else." "What?" I asked, my heart sinking. "We pulled her financials. She's been getting payments from Evelyn's accounts, but there's another source offshore, untraceable. Looks like she's tied to some bad people, Jack. Not just small-time fraud like her brother. We're talking organized crime, maybe low-level, but enough to make her dangerous. You need to lock down your house." I didn't sleep after that. I checked the cameras, tested the new locks, and moved Ethan's bed into our room. Claire didn't argue. She just hugged me, her arms trembling, and whispered, "End this, Jack. For Ethan." "I will," I said, and I meant it. The next morning, I went back to the neighbors, this time with a plan. I needed more than evidence, now we needed allies. Willow Grove had been under Evelyn's thumb for years, but her arrest had cracked the dam. People were talking, sharing stories, realizing they weren't alone. I started with Javier Ruiz, the mechanic who'd seen Rachel's SUV. He was in his garage, working on a carburetor, when I walked in. "Javier," I said, "I need you to rally the neighbors. Rachel's still out there, and she's not done. I've got proof she's tied to Evelyn's schemes, but she's dangerous. We need to stand together." He wiped his hands on a rag, his eyes hard. "You're preaching to the choir, Jack. Evelyn fined me out of my savings, and Rachel keyed my truck. I'm in. Who else you got?" We went door to door, not begging this time, but building. Mrs. Nguyen, the widow with the fine flowers, agreed to talk to the police about Rachel lurking near her garden last year. Tom Carver, the single dad with the shed, brought photos of graffiti on his fence, a graffiti that matched the red marker on my brick. And Mrs. Delgado, the librarian, brought Leela, her 13-year-old neighbor who'd seen Evelyn break a skateboard. Leela was nervous, her hands twisting in her lap, but she nodded when I asked if she'd testify about Rachel's presence in the neighborhood. By the end of the day, I had a coalition, 12 families, all with stories of harassment, all willing to stand up. It wasn't just about Ethan anymore, it was about reclaiming Willow Grove from the Harpers' reign of fear. But I knew Rachel wouldn't go quietly. She wasn't Evelyn, hiding behind bylaws and smiles. She was raw, reckless, and now she had nothing to lose. The attack came 2 nights later. I was in the garage, reviewing footage, when the motion sensor light blazed on, flooding the front yard. I checked the camera feed and saw Tyrannical, in a black hoodie, creeping along the side of our house. She was holding something, a glint of metal in her hand. Not a brick this time, a crowbar. I grabbed the baseball bat and slipped out the back door, moving silently round the house. My heart was pounding, but my mind was clear. This wasn't about rules anymore. This was survival. I rounded the corner and saw her at the garage door, prying at the lock. Her movements quick and practiced. She didn't hear me until I was 5 feet away. "Drop it," I said, my voice low, the bat raised. She froze, then turned slowly, her sunglasses gone, her eyes cold and sharp. "You're persistent," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "I'll give you that." "You're done, Rachel," I said. "The police have your financials, your sister's in jail, and I've got you on camera. Step away from my house." She laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. "You think a few cameras scare me? You took everything from my sister. You think I'm going to let you walk away?" She lunged, the crowbar swinging toward my head. I ducked, instinct taking over, and swung the bat. It connected with her arm, a sickening crack echoing in the night. She screamed, the crowbar clattering to the ground, and stumbled back, clutching her wrist. "You bastard," she spat, her face twisted in pain. "You'll pay for this." I stepped forward, the bat still raised. "You're the one who's paying. You and Evelyn thought you could bully this neighborhood, hurt my son, and get away with it. Not anymore." She scrambled to her feet, her eyes wild, and ran toward her SUV parked down the street. I didn't chase her. I didn't need to. The cameras had caught everything: her face, the crowbar, the attack. I called Torres, my voice steady despite the adrenaline. "Rachel just tried to break into my house. I've got it on video. Get here now." 20 minutes later, 2 squad cars pulled up, their lights cutting through the dark. Torres watched the footage, his jaw tight. "That's attempted burglary, maybe assault with a deadly weapon." "We've got her, Jack." "Where'd she go?" "Black SUV, headed west," I said. "She's hurt, her arm's probably broken." Torres nodded. "We'll find her. Stay inside. Keep your family safe." Rachel was arrested the next morning at a gas station 20 miles away, her arm in a makeshift sling, her SUV packed with clothes and cash. She didn't go quietly. Torres said she kicked an officer and screamed about a conspiracy against her family, but the evidence was overwhelming. The camera footage, the crowbar with her prints, the financial records tying her to Evelyn's fraud, and the witness statements from Leila, Linda Carter, and half a dozen neighbors. The DA added charges of stalking, vandalism, and attempted burglary to her rap sheet. Evelyn's case was already moving forward, but Rachel's arrest sealed their fate. The Harper dynasty was crumbling. The trial was a spectacle. Willow Grove's community center, once Evelyn's throne room, was packed with neighbors, reporters, and curious onlookers from neighboring towns. Evelyn sat at the defense table, her gray pantsuit replaced by a prison jumpsuit, her face pale but defiant. Rachel, her arm in a cast, sat beside her, her eyes burning with hatred every time they met mine. The prosecution laid out the case methodically: $150,000 in embezzled HOA funds, a pattern of harassment spanning years, and Evelyn's assault as the centerpiece. I took the stand first, my voice steady as I recounted the day Ethan was hurt. I described Evelyn's cold dismissal, the blood on the grass, the fear in my son's eyes. I played the footage of Rachel's attack, showed the brick, the financial records, the neighbor testimonies. The jury listened, their faces grim, some wiping tears as I spoke about Ethan's nightmares, his refusal to play outside. Leila was next, her voice trembling but clear. "I saw Mrs. Harper break Miguel's skateboard," she said, "and I saw Ms. Rachel watching Mr. Bennett's house, taking pictures. She scared me." Linda Carter testified about her slashed tires, Mrs. Delgado about her grandson's fear, Javier about his keyed truck. Each story built a picture of the Harper's Rainbow sisters. who'd turned a neighborhood into their personal fiefdom, using fear and money to control everyone around them. Evelyn's lawyer tried to spin it, painting her as a dedicated volunteer overwhelmed by responsibility. Rachel's lawyer claimed she was a loyal sister protecting her family's legacy, but the evidence was a tidal wave, and their defenses were sandcastles. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. When they returned, the foreman's voice was steady, guilty on all counts. Evelyn got 12 years for embezzlement and aggravated assault. Rachel got 8 for fraud, stalking, and attempted burglary. As the bailiffs cuffed them, Evelyn's eyes met mine, her face a mask of rage. Rachel spat on the floor, her voice a hiss. "This isn't over, Bennett." I didn't flinch. "Yes, it is." The courtroom erupted in applause as they were led away, neighbors hugging, some crying, others shaking their heads in disbelief. For the first time in years, Willow Grove felt free. The aftermath was quiet, but not easy. Ethan started therapy, his nightmares fading but not gone. He drew pictures again, not forts or castles, but shields, like he was guarding something precious. Claire and I rebuilt our routines, but we kept the cameras up, just in case. The HOA was dissolved, replaced by a new board of neighbors: Javier, Mrs. Nguyen, Tom Carver, people who'd fought alongside us. They voted to rename the community park Effen's Place, a tribute to the boy who'd sparked the rebellion. We planted flowers, built a playground, and installed a plaque for courage, for community, for the children we protect. But Rachel's words lingered. "This isn't over." I didn't trust the silence, so I kept digging, just to be sure. I found out Evelyn had a cousin, a man named Victor Harper, who'd been linked to the offshore account Torres mentioned. He was a ghost, no address, no record, but I wasn't taking chances. I upgraded our security system, added floodlights, and trained Ethan and Claire on what to do if they saw a stranger. The Harpers had taught me one thing: evil doesn't always come with a warning. One night, a month after the trial, I got a call from Torres. "Jack, you need to hear this." We intercepted a prison call from Evelyn to Victor. "She's talking about finishing the job. We don't know what it means, but we're tracking him. Stay vigilant." I didn't tell Claire. She'd been through enough. Instead, I sat in the garage, watching the cameras, the bat by my side. At 2 a.m., the motion sensor tripped. I checked the feed and saw a mantle, lean, with the same sharp features as Evelyn and Rachel standing at the edge of our property. He wasn't holding a crowbar or a brick. He was just standing there, watching, his hands in his pockets. I didn't call the police. I stepped outside, the bat in one hand, my phone recording in the other. "Victor Harper," I said, my voice carrying across the yard. "You're on camera. Leave now, or you'll end up like your cousins." He didn't move at first, just stared, his eyes unreadable in the dark. Then he raised a hand, not in threat, but in salute, and walked away, disappearing into the shadows. I sent the footage to Torres, who promised to track him down. But Victor never came back. Maybe he saw the cameras, the lights, the neighborhood that no longer bode to fear. Maybe he knew the Harpers' time was over. Years passed. Ethan grew stronger, his laughter returning, though he still checked the windows before going outside. He started riding his bike again, racing the Patel kids down the street, their shouts filling the air. Claire went back to her shifts at the hospital, her smile brighter, her shoulders lighter. The neighborhood changed too. Mrs. Nguyen's flowers bloomed without fines, Tom's shed stood proud, and Javier's truck parked wherever he damn well pleased. Willow Grove wasn't perfect, but it was ours again. Ethan, at 12, decided he wanted to be a lawyer to help kids like me, he said. I smiled, my chest tight with pride. He'd seen what it meant to fight, not just for yourself, but for others. Claire and I supported him, enrolled him in debate club, watched him argue his way through mock trials with a fire I recognized from myself. Evelyn died in prison 3 years into her sentence. A stroke, they said. No one mourned her. Rachel was released after 5 years, but she never returned to Willow Grove. Word was she moved across the country, her name a whisper of shame. Victor stayed a ghost, his offshore accounts frozen, his trail cold. The Harpers were gone, their legacy reduced to a plaque in Effen's Place, a reminder of what we'd overcome. But the real victory wasn't their defeat. It was the mornings when Ethan drew shields in his notebook, when Claire laughed without looking over her shoulder, when neighbors waved without fear. It was the day we rebuilt the playground, the whole street pitching in, hammers banging, kids cheering. It was the moment Ethan, now 15, stood in Ethan's place and said, "This is home, Dad. They can't take it from us." He was right. The Harpers had tried to control us with rules, with fear, with violence, but they'd underestimated what happens when a father, a family, a community refuses to break. We didn't just win a fight. We rewrote our story, line by line, shield by shield. And every spring, when the flowers bloomed in Ethan's place, I'd walk the path with my son, his hand in mine, and know we'd done more than survive. We'd built something unbreakable. It's a promise kept, a child protected, a neighborhood reborn. If this story moved you, leave a justice in the comments. Tell me what you'd do if someone tried to take your home, your family, your peace. Because here, we don't just tell stories, we fight for them.